All right, some of these speculated Boston Red Sox offers for Garrett Crochet seem too good to be true. So let's discuss what could happen on a crossover edition of Locked On White Sox and Locked On Red Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host of the Locked On White Sox, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fansided Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And I'm here with Gabby Hurlbut, host of Locked On Red Sox, former ESPN social media associate, and current host of the Boston Balling podcast. And thank you for making Locked On White Sox and Locked On Red Sox your first listen, depending on what team you root for here. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox or at Locked On Red Sox if you've not done so already. And also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. So Gabby and I are going to tackle on this Thanksgiving episode the Red Sox interest in Garrett Crochet, the past deal with both teams involving a White Sox ace, and then let's talk about who has the more iconic logo. And Gabby, first is Wilyer Abreu or Tristan Casas. I probably butchered both their names. I always keep doing it, and I got to keep going through the Baseball Reference pronunciation guide. But yeah, but are they in play? Because Jim Bowden of the Athletics seems to think they could be.
Yeah, it's funny when you say butchering their names because the number of announcers that I've heard butcher their names is a list of many. So you're definitely not the first one there. But yeah, it's definitely interesting hearing, these rumors about the offseason and who might go where and who might come to Boston. And this is a really important offseason for the Red Sox. They need to make a lot of moves in order to get back into contention for 2025 because they were a very mediocre baseball team in 2024 and the pitching was the biggest thing that held them back from being a playoff team. And obviously, when it comes to trading players, they have kind of gone on record and said they're not afraid to trade people if it means bringing in pieces that are going to help create that championship team. And with Tristan Casas, he's a fantastic baseball player, had a really good rookie season, was in the running for Rookie of the Year for pretty much the whole season, and then missed a lot of 2024 due to injury. But he'll be a 40 home run player at some point in his career. So I don't think there's any doubt that the Red Sox would be losing a pretty special player if they do trade Casas. But if they do, and I think it's a possibility they do because they've already started a conversation about potentially moving Rafael Devers to first base. So if that's the case, then that would indicate to me that they are sold on moving Casas. They've kind of said, we are happy Casas is on our team, and haven't been fully direct when it comes to answering the question about him. But I absolutely think it's not something I'm going to rule out. I think whether he stays or he goes, I wouldn't be fully surprised either way. I think there's a possibility that they decide, he's our first baseman of the future, we're going to keep him. But I think if it comes to getting a pitcher of Crochet's caliber, I don't think they'd be afraid to make that move because then they can bring in somebody else to play third base and move Devers to first. And when it comes to Abreu, I've been saying all offseason, I think it makes sense to move him regardless. The Red Sox have a plethora of outfielders right now with a prospect named Roman Anthony, who is one of the best prospects in the game right now and will likely get his shot sooner rather than later in the majors. So that would kind of leave them with this extra outfielder that they wouldn't really know what to do with. And Wilyer Abreu is coming off of a great rookie season, won a Gold Glove, and had a fantastic bat that he brought to the Red Sox lineup. And if they're going to trade him, now is the time to trade him when they have this overload of outfielders on the team and he had the season he had. So they should trade him now when his value is high. And I did read something about how the White Sox are interested in him. So I think between the two, he would be the one that we'd see more likely to be moved, but it wouldn't surprise me if it takes moving both of them to get Crochet to Boston.
Well, Abreu would actually finally solve the White Sox problem in right field. They've been trying to replace Jermaine Dye, and he retired in 2009. So that's why I would love to have him, and I would for Casas, I would drive to O'Hare and pick him up at the airport myself too. But I do have my hypothesis on why this deal still hasn't even been completed if Abreu is potentially involved. And I think it's the White Sox are probably asking for Roman Anthony or Marcelo Mayer. How untouchable are those two?
Yeah, I think they're completely untouchable. I think there's 4 prospects that are completely untouchable. You can add Kyle Teal and Christian Campbell to the mix too, because the Red Sox have had scenarios in the past, particularly at this past year's trade deadline and last offseason, in which teams were asking about those guys. And the Red Sox said, no, we're not moving any of them. And it came out later that they didn't trade for a specific player because they wanted one of those guys, and the Red Sox said no, they're untouchable. And I tend to think you're right. I think that they probably want maybe Wilyer Abreu and one of those players, but the Red Sox have made it so clear for a few years now that those guys are the future. Those are the guys that they want to build around, and I don't think they would execute any trade that involves moving one of those players, which I am all for and I agree with. I think those are the guys you want to keep around because they've been so focused on building for the future over the last few seasons that you don't want to trade away some of that future. So that's why I think they would be more likely to push more towards moving Tristan Casas with Abreu, plus maybe another high-end prospect that isn't one of those names. And I think that's maybe something the Red Sox are trying to work out with them to get them to say yes to that kind of deal. But I think those guys are 100% untouchable because they've made that clear for a while, and they've passed on trades for good quality players in the past when it would take moving one of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, because this deal could have been done probably last week. I mean, John Morosi was just on MLB Network saying, look out for the Boston Red Sox. And it just makes sense because the White Sox want positional hitters. They need positional prospects. Their system right now is completely devoid. They've got maybe 3, and then they got a guy at single A that could potentially, George Welcole, that could potentially be impact bats or even just everyday players. So right now they need that, and Boston has that in spades. But I could just see them because they didn't trade Crochet to the Dodgers because the Dodgers wouldn't put in their top prospect, Dalton Rushing. So I could just see them holding up this deal because they want Anthony, which I don't think you're going to get the number 3 prospect in all of baseball. Those trades don't happen, especially once they hit Double A. I think that's a thing that maybe if Red Sox fans are like, well, why are you holding on to these guys? Just studying the trade market, being a lowly White Sox fan is you look at this more and more teams, once they can get a positional player, especially if they're highly rated, once they get to Double A, they're holding on to them like grim death because they come cheap. And even though Boston, that's one of the things that they're going to have to try to overcome in the Juan Soto sweepstakes is they now have, they didn't pay Mookie Betts. So now they got a bad rap in free agency because they won't pay, it seems like now. But if they somehow win the Juan Soto sweepstakes, how does that motivate Boston more to trade for Crochet, or do they still have enough money to go out and say sign Corbin Burnes?
Yeah, this is actually an interesting topic that I talked about on my show earlier this week is what exactly do the options look like for the Red Sox? And I actually said if they get Juan Soto, I think the chances are a lot more likely that they amp up their efforts to trade for Crochet because I don't see them wanting to go out and spend all of that money on a free agent starter if they're committing to Juan Soto. So I think if they win the Juan Soto sweepstakes, which I don't think they're completely out of it, I think they have a decent shot because of what their future looks like. And Soto seems to care about the future of the team he goes to. If they win the Soto sweepstakes, I think that they would be more likely to acquire that number 1 starter via trade as opposed to free agency. But if they miss out on Soto, I think they would be more inclined to say, okay, let's go out and offer Corbin Burnes a lot of money since we now have that money to spend and we didn't spend it on Soto because he went elsewhere. So let's just sign Corbin Burnes so we don't have to give up any of these other guys. So I think a lot of this is going to be dependent on what happens with Soto. I don't know that the Red Sox would execute this type of move until Soto decides. But the risk with that is that they're risking missing out. Like if Corbin Burnes decides he's going to make his decision before that and he signs elsewhere and the Red Sox miss out on him, then they're kind of stuck if they're still banking on a decision from Soto. But I do think Soto is kind of the driving force behind all of this, because I do think trading for Crochet would be even more, for the Red Sox right now, urgent, and they would see that as the way to get that true number one starter than via free agency if they do get Soto. But there have been questions surrounding, is Garrett Crochet 100% certainly an ace? Because obviously what I've seen from him, he is, but people are worried a little bit about sample size and whether, if they give up this big package for him, is he definitely going to pan out as that number one starter that people are looking for?
All right, so to feed the Boston market there, you only have to worry about Crochet throwing his slider to righties down and in. It just seems like for some reason the ball stays up like an extra tick second in the zone as it's trying to get down, and then that's where hitters can square him up. So if he is throwing a slider, you want it either outside onto righties. That's where his one pitch struggles. Otherwise, the guy's a stud. He's an ace. He has cleared every hurdle. This guy threw 73 career innings coming into this season and basically begged and pleaded with the front office to make him a starter. And they're like, well, we're not going anywhere. Fine. And then they trade Dylan Cease and he becomes the opening day starter. And I remember being like, oh my God, this is the worst decision ever. He's coming off Tommy John. He was hurt. One of the reasons why that, former manager Ricky Renteria got fired was because Garrett Crochet got hurt in game 3 of the wild card series. So it's like, oh my. And then he comes out and he throws a 1-run 7-inning opening day start against the Detroit Tigers. And then it's just been constantly getting better and better every game. The only hurdle he has left to clear is can he actually pitch more than 4 innings after the second half or after the first half, because he was on a pitch limit for that. But really the only pitch you have to worry about is if he's throwing that slider to lefties and he's trying to get it down, to the righties, down and in, balls are going to be flying out of Fenway. In that case, that would be the only thing that I'd have to worry about. But before we get to the break, I do have one more question. Do you actually see Boston making this year's first round pick Braden Montgomery available in any deal? Just because we talked about it. Yes, he's a first round pick. Maybe you don't want to trade him right away, but hasn't played yet. He's not even at AA yet. So would he be maybe the marquee prospect that the Reds offer along with Abreu?
I do think so. Yes, absolutely. I think they'd be a lot more inclined to make him available than the guys we talked about before, the top 4 prospects there that they want to hang on to, because like you said, he's unproven. So we have no idea what he's going to be and if he's going to pan out or not. And if a team is willing to take him on now, I do think the Red Sox would be more inclined to say, yeah, let's move him, because if he turns out to be a stud, oh, well, it is what it is. That is part of the business. But if he doesn't, then the Red Sox in the long run can say, all right, well, we made the right move in moving him. His name has been brought up a lot, and he's an enticing name because of the skill set that he provides and his potential of what he could be. And I do think the White Sox could be interested in that. And, this guy was a highly regarded player, then the Red Sox drafted him early on. And he obviously has a lot of things that he could potentially bring to the table. And I think the White Sox would not be afraid to take on that potential and be okay with the growth process that comes with that because of where their organization is at right now.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, even though like some, teams wouldn't be like, I'm not trading my first round pick of this year right away. Until they hit AA, they're still complete unknowns. There's still the potential for failure. So that's why I was like, well, maybe for the Sox, because it did sound like he was high on their list for somebody that they were going to draft, the White Sox at number 5, but then he has the injury. And I think that's why they went with Hagen Smith. So I could see them being like, okay, give us a big leaguer, and then we'll take this guy and maybe a couple other scratch offs instead. But there are still some scarred White Sox fans from the last time the Red Sox and White Sox did business involving an ace. So we're going to revisit the Chris Sale trade after the break. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And I always maintain FanDuel's spreads, over and unders, money lines. They're fun to play, but if you want to hit big or at least double your money, FanDuel's parlays, props, and futures is the way to go. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And welcome back to a crossover edition of Locked On White Sox and Locked On Red Sox. I'm Todd Welter, host of Locked On Red Sox. Gabby Hurlbut, she's the host of Locked On Red Sox. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox or at Locked On Red Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox and Locked On Red Sox is available on all major podcast platforms, so make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox or Boston Red Sox baseball venting with us, or Boston Red Sox information or Chicago White Sox information. For White Sox lately, it's been a lot of venting. A lot of venting. You know, I'm sorry, and we're going to get to this probably in the next segment, but Boston Red Sox fans usually always think it's worse. It's a heck of a lot worse on the South side, okay? Never had to endure the pain, especially in the last 2 years.
Which Sox team is better? It's always
which Sox team is more we're going to get to that in the third segment about which team is like probably more, cursed and all that, or was cursed and all that stuff. All right, so I got to ask you, how surprised were you that Chris Sale won the Cy Young with the Braves?
Not as surprised as I thought I was going to be. I kind of saw it coming. I was like, the Red Sox are going to let him go and he's going to go off and have a Cy Young caliber season the next year. I think we kind of anticipated that he was on a bit of an upswing because he was getting healthy again. He was pitching well at the end of the season before the Red Sox executed that trade. And it was at the point where I said, yeah, he'll probably go somewhere else and he'll pitch well there for 1 or 2 seasons. And, for the Braves, it made sense for them to go after somebody like Chris Sale because that roster is in championship mode. They're like, we are going for a World Series title, and adding a guy who's already done that before, who has the experience, could be the piece we need to get all the way. Obviously, he was injured for the postseason, and I said, all right, that sounds like Chris Sale. And that was one of the biggest things I was concerned about this past season was, is he going to be healthy enough all season long to make the type of impact that the Braves need him to make? But I said, if he's healthy, he's going to have a really good season, because I saw the glimpses of that towards the end of the previous season to know, okay, Chris Sale's on an upswing right now. If the Red Sox keep him around, he probably won't have that type of season with our luck. But I kind of saw that coming, and, I'm happy for him. He definitely deserves it. The guy works ridiculously hard, and I know he was dying to have a really strong, healthy season after everything he's been through during his time with the Red Sox. So I'm happy for him, but it definitely was tough watching that as a Red Sox fan and seeing how much success he was having, knowing that the Red Sox didn't have an ace all season long, and saying, imagine if Chris Sale was here, they would have won some more games and probably would have been looking at a wild card spot.
All right, again, we're going to get into this pain. Imagine having to watch Chris Sale not only win the World Series, but then win his Cy Young, not in a White Sox uniform, because the White Sox, one of the biggest regrets that baffles me to this day is how the White Sox could not field at least one competitive team around Chris Sale. And then they had Jose Quintana too. Like when Jose Quintana was like a legit number 2 pitcher, they had an ace and a number 2, and they just could not put a good team around him. I mean, he's known more as a legend for the White Sox for cutting up their throwback uniforms than he is for winning the World's, because he didn't win his World Series here. He didn't win his Cy Young. He was so close to winning a Cy Young in the South Side, but because of the teams were so bad, he never got it. And then he obviously, you guys got the ticking time bomb, because that was the one thing with Chris Sale was, when is he going to get his Tommy John? Because the only thing that I didn't like about watching Chris Sale pitch was just that delivery. It was like, I could literally see your elbow popping out, dude. Like
Yeah,
it was kind of gross.
The
I would
writing was
love-
on the wall for that to happen, to be
Yeah.
honest with you.
So, so that sort of mitigates, but I'm going to declare Boston the winner of that trade because Yoan Moncada and Michael Kopech flamed out. Do you guys declare yourselves the winner and accept the award of being the winner of the trade?
We do. Yeah, absolutely. At the time that the trade was made, it made a lot of sense for the Red Sox because they had a lot of the pieces and it was about kind of getting them over that hump and bringing in Chris Sale. I mean, obviously you mentioned it already. He won a World Series with the Red Sox. Those 2 seasons in 2017 and 2018, we got a very, very good version of Sale. I think it's more the regret comes more when they offered him that long contract extension. That's more where the regret comes in because obviously then his injury started to happen and the Red Sox couldn't really maximize what they could have gotten from him at that point after that started to happen. But if we're looking at just the trade for what it is and what the Red Sox gave up and ultimately in the long run, I do think, yes, the Red Sox won the trade because they got what they were looking for out of that trade, which was a World Series championship. And Sale was at the forefront of that World Series championship. And at the time, I was like, wow, the Red Sox are giving away some good players. Like, I'm sure, a couple of these guys will pan out for the White Sox and turn into studs. And we'll be like, wow, I wish he was still here. But it feels more like the Red Sox got what they needed from that trade ultimately in the long run than the White Sox did.
Yeah, and I think it's actually it's a weird trade to look back on in history in that it'll probably be one of the last times that a team really gives up, again, a top 10 prospect for a pitcher because of the injury risk and that type of stuff. That was just a different era even 8 years ago. And now you're realizing, I mean, now again, we're talking about the Red Sox having the number 3 prospect and he's untouchable, where in 2016, that's your headliner. And I don't think we're going to have that have that ever again. And then the other weird thing is just how that trade ends up being in Boston's favor just because they won the World Series, because in the end, all 3 guys, both teams walked away with broken players at the end of the day. Yoan Moncada was always injured, could never be consistent then when he was healthy. Michael Kopech was either always injured or in his head thinking, I'll just throw the ball harder. Speaking of Kopech, being an observer from afar, were you actually dumbfounded that he found his dominant stuff in Los Angeles?
Yeah. And I was like, of course it happens with the Dodgers because this seems to be a pattern that players go to the Dodgers and then miraculously they just get fixed. Like Ryan Brazier, who was also in a Red Sox uniform and was terrible out of the Red Sox bullpen. And then all of a sudden is untouchable and dominant when he's with the Dodgers. Like, how do these things happen? So I was sitting there watching Kopech pitch with LA and I was like, who is this person? Like, where did this come from? And it's like, of course, of all teams for him to just dominate with, it's the Dodgers who already have a stacked roster as it is. To add that to it, like him pitching during that playoff run, I was like, yeah, this guy is like, one of their best relievers right now. Like he's doing a lot here to win games for them. And I definitely didn't expect that. I felt like I saw a foundation with him for him to be successful in Major League Baseball, but I kind of started to feel like he wasn't really ever going to get to that point. So I definitely was surprised to see what he did with the Dodgers because I just didn't expect him to be at that level.
Although I think the Dodgers get too much credit. It's a little bit overrated because, his last 5 games with the White Sox, he was dominant. And here's the ironic thing. Fires his agent, hires Scott Boras. I think Scott Boras finally got through to him to be like, if you actually want to have a career, stop trying to throw the ball harder and harder and harder. Listen to your pitch plan. So he does that, has an immaculate inning with the White Sox, and then ends up getting traded in probably one of the biggest fleecings known to mankind, where the White Sox end up with Miguel Vargas and a prospect with a broken leg. That's why, hey, at least when I know there's a lot of scarred White Sox fans out there. They're scarred, but you did have at least a little bit of something from Moncada and and Kopech, where right now you've got a meme of Miguel Vargas looking dazed and confused and like, what am I doing? That's all they got right now out of this trade that they got for Kopech. And now that they traded him to the Dodgers, and they traded their other best asset, Eric Fetty, to the St. Louis Cardinals, and the St. Louis Cardinals didn't have to pay a thing. They gave up Tommy Edman or whatever. I mean, it's the greatest fleecing of all time. The greatest fleecing of all time. And if anybody says the Red Sox fleeced the White Sox out of the South, no, they at least got something for a little bit.
Yeah, this was a lot worse, I feel like, for the White Sox. Like, yes, the Red Sox clearly won the Chris Sale trade, but this Dodgers one was way worse because at least, like, you got some productivity out of the Red Sox trade. This is just like you basically got nothing. And the Dodgers won a World Series with Kopech being one of the biggest pieces of that World Series run. And it's crazy to think about the Dodgers and, you know, how many connections they have to the Red Sox too. And I was sitting there watching them win that World Series and I was like, oh, Mookie, congratulations. Yay for him, you know, like, and I'm sitting there like Dave Roberts, big Red Sox legend too, like good for him winning the World Series. And it's interesting how many Red Sox connections are on that current Dodgers team right now. And I'm like, yeah, it's just crazy to think about these guys who wouldn't even have been pitching as much if it weren't for all the injuries that they had too. And it's just crazy to think about the fact that they won the series and won the whole thing with all of the injuries that they had to some key pitchers. And now they are just going to be better next year because they just added Blake Snell to their pitching staff too. So if I'm any other team, that's tough to watch the Dodgers just continue to add players after just winning the World Series.
Yeah. So both Sox teams have iconic logos since it's Thanksgiving, let's possibly get into an argument after the break like most Americans might, but at least this time it won't be about politics and religion. All right, welcome back to a crossover edition of Locked On White Sox and Locked On Red Sox. I'm the host of Locked On White Sox, Todd Welter, and I'm here with the host of Locked On Red Sox, Gabby Hurlbut. Shout out to all our everydayers. We appreciate your loyalty. Again, please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox or at Locked On Red Sox or wherever they get their podcasts, as both shows are available on all major podcast platforms. All right, so I maintain the two best logos in baseball is the White Sox logo here and the Boston Red Sox B logo. However, the White Sox will always be the best. And it's not just biased, okay? We got hip hop culture behind us. Also the different logos. We got Batterman. You know, they've been great. And I'm going to die on this hill. But do you believe that the Boston Red Sox have a better logo than the White Sox?
Yes. First of all, because the colors are cooler. So there's that. Like I mean, like who doesn't love that Boston red? And like it's way more appealing to look at the Red Sox logo. No. And like, if I'm not a baseball fan at all and I look at those two logos next to each other, I'm going to say the Red Sox logo looks cooler because it's more colorful. It stands out more and it's more simple. Just a B, like that's like legendary. Like people know that that's a Red Sox B and they don't need to read multiple letters on the logo. They just look and it's like a nice decorative B that's outlined in the nice dark blue and the red stands out and it's just, it looks nice. And like on a hat, like who wants to read the word Sox when they can just look at it and know, oh, that's a Red Sox hat.
Who wants to read? Who wants to read?
Nobody likes to read.
I mean, come on. We have some of the best logos in the history of the game. Okay. You know, none of that, the Sox logo, the 1919, you know, Field of Dreams, one of the greatest iconic logos ever. The B logo, I mean, come on, that's you know, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, boring movie game. You know, we have Dr. Dre. Dr. Dre had his chance. He could probably have been like, do I want to wear the Boston Red Sox B or do I want to wear the White Sox crest? I'm going to go with the White Sox crest. I mean, I don't hear many legendary rap out lyrics mentioning the Boston B. I'm sorry.
But the number of movies, like, I mean,
because Ben Affleck and Matt Damon are in them. Okay. Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. I'll give you what their pitch is always like. We're going to set this in Boston. Okay. We're going to use our Boston accents. We're going to rob a bank or we're going to talk about how, you know, we're alcoholics and stuff like that. And boom, we're going to make some money. That's what it is.
It's also associated with, I mean, the best franchise in baseball, obviously, ours. Oh. And the, you know, the history with the Boston Red Sox and being one of the biggest markets in the sport also helps with our points here when it comes to people recognizing
the East Coast bias. The East Coast bias, the biggest, you know, Chicago, third biggest market. We're bigger. You know, it's just we're not out here going, oh, look at our pain. We went went 86 years without a World Series. The White Sox went 88 years. They won the next year, and ESPN tried to bury it. The Cubs went 108, and yet here we are.
Yeah, but they're not the Boston Red Sox.
Yeah, but another Netflix documentary. I was thinking to myself,
they're also the only team to come back from down 0-3.
Don't go down 0-3. Don't go down 0-3. You know what you do? You sweep the next year. You go 11-1, the most dominant run ever. Okay, where's our documentaries?
Because nobody cares.
Oh! But there is a documentary.
People actually care about David Ortiz and the 2004 Red Sox.
Well, that's because the East Coast bias is now buried, because on the way to winning a World Series, the greatest World Series, you will never see a team win a World Series in that fashion ever again. Think about that. 4 straight complete games. 4.
Yeah, no, that'll never happen again.
That'll never happen again. You have El Duque running out, bases loaded at Fenway, gets out of it, and what do we got? We don't have Bill Simmons. That's the problem. You guys got Bill Simmons. He's like, what we could use? We could use another Netflix documentary, another documentary. We got a 30 for 30, and now we got this. Okay. Although I got to admit, I watched all 3 episodes.
Did you?
It was fine. Curt Schilling, what is on his head? Seriously, what's on his head?
I don't know, but
remove that thing.
I mean, I hate to say it, but he does not look good at all.
No, he looks terrible.
It's kind of sad.
Yeah, he looks like, I'm like, what is going on with it? Like, at least
I don't know what happened to the guy. He just does not look good.
Yeah, like time, to Jason Varitek. Okay, I get it. He's a former catcher. You're gonna maybe, but I mean, I was like, Curt Schilling, I'm like, good Lord, man, how much chew has given you that much? I mean, is being an angry troll make you look that bad as a human being?
I think so.
Am I okay to call Schilling an angry troll? I mean, I know he's still around Boston for his bloody sock.
He is, yeah.
Sock.
That's legendary, though. See, this is what I mean. Like, there's so many legendary Red Sox moments and legendary Red Sox players.
Don't go down 3-0, though. Don't go down 3-0. Just dominate.
Well, I mean, that just made it even more special that we just embarrassed the Yankees in that fashion. That just made the whole thing even better. Like, there wouldn't have been a documentary if we didn't come back from down 3-0.
Okay, I before we go, I do want to talk about that, because at Fanside, my boss is a huge Yankees fan, and he tweeted that how now since 2004, the Yankees have won 1 World Series, the Red Sox have won 3, all that stuff, and I was like, dude, try being a White Sox fan who just lost 121 games after losing 101 games, and he was like, oh no, I'd rather be a White Sox fan because then I don't have to see my rival like this. What would you rather have? On the flip side, for all those years that the Red Sox were always down, would you rather lose 121 games in a season, root for that team, or on the flip side, and you avoid having to watch your rival win all these World Series, or on the flip side, watching a rival win some World Series?
No, I'd rather be the White Sox fan.
Oh, no, you don't want that evil.
There's nothing that I dislike more than the Yankees winning anything, and that's why it brought me so much joy seeing them blow Game 5 of the World Series the way that they did.
But they still got to the World Series. They still got there. They have an American League championship. That's the whole thing.
Well, I was mad. Like, I was mad that they got to the World Series, but the AL teams that could have beaten them decided to choke. Astros, I'm looking at you. And they just had this easy road to the World Series, but I knew that they weren't beating the Dodgers. I knew the Dodgers were just a better team, and the Yankees, if they miss out on Juan Soto, which hopefully they will, because if he doesn't go to the Red Sox, I think he'll end up going to the Mets. That would be funny because he was one of the biggest reasons they got to the World Series. So good luck trying to get back there if you don't have Juan Soto on the team.
The Schadenfreude on the East Coast is strong. I guess because
I hate the Yankees.
I mean, look, I'm not a huge Cubs fan, or I'm not a, I don't like the Cubs either, but I was able to handle it because, I had a lot of friends, that were Cubs fans. My grandpa was a Cubs fan, even though he went into the ground, never seeing it.
That's sad.
Yeah, like that. But, and I get that's the romanticism of like being the Cubs and the Red Sox and even a White Sox fan was those droughts. But, it wasn't the end of the world for me, but man, wanting to lose 121 games. I was doing shows that were comparing the White Sox to the Philadelphia A's. Okay, the 1916 Philadelphia A's. I had to track that. I just did a show yesterday about the Sox possibly on track to lose more than the Mets did in their first 4 seasons of existence. 452 games. Okay, you don't want that evil.
That's really sad. That was, sometimes I thought about that. I was like, wow, like imagine being a White Sox fan this season. Like I wonder what went through those people's heads throughout the course of this season.
Frustration, anger.
Except they were able to beat my team somehow.
Yes, we did. And I, for that, I appreciate your service. Well, that wraps up this edition of a crossover edition between Locked On White Sox and Locked On Red Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox and Locked On Red Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I'll be back tomorrow with the discussion of the Sox. I'll be back tomorrow to talk about Blake Snell and how that helps the White Sox trade market with Garrett Crochet. Gabby, what do you got planned for tomorrow?
Yeah, similar topic. I'll be talking about what's next for the Red Sox after missing out on Blake Snell. What are their options in terms of pitchers? So you definitely won't want to miss that conversation.
All right, and feel free to leave comments about today's discussion. You can leave them at the episode page on each of our YouTube pages. For me, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub, or at Locked On Sox. Gabby, what's your handle again?
Yes, you can follow me on X at Gabby Hurlbut 10 or Locked On Red Sox at LO_Red Sox as well.
All right, and you can also email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Do you have a Locked On email? Do you have an email address there?
It's it's lockedonredsox@gmail.com. Ignore that at the beginning.
Yeah. So lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com or lockedonredsox@gmail.com. And again, have a great day. Happy Thanksgiving. We will see you tomorrow.